Okay, so a bit of a life update here for 2020. It is the spring, towards the end of January, January 28th to be specific, 2020. We're here at Fort Bragg, California, finishing up a contract at Mendocino Coast District Hospital. Got here I believe on November 4th, and the majority of this contract has been pretty stressful, pretty packed, and all of that's due to having some pretty serious damage to the RPOD as we came into Fort Bragg here off Highway 20. So what ended up happening, Highway 20 is a 35-mile kind of mountain road, very curvy. Ended up getting here in the middle of the night. Very close to within like 5 miles of Fort Bragg off the end of that highway, and pulled off into a paved turnoff, which is there for slower vehicles to let other cars pass, so letting another car pass. Hit a pothole with the trailer, didn't seem to hit it with the truck, and I got out to check what had happened, heard a loud pop, got out to check, it looked like it had popped the fender. Which is not a huge deal. I can remount the fenders, that's not a problem. So I just continued on into Fort Bragg. It was the next day before I could really assess it. Took the fenders off, was going to remount it. When I took the fenders off, noticed that the wheel had a pretty significant negative camber towards the side of the rig. Looks like it had even touched the rig. There was tire marks on the side of the wall. No, like, damage to the fiberglass though. So one, it looked like there was axle damage as the wheel was pretty tilted, and two, when I was assessing the axle, noticed that there was a buckle in the frame right after the axle weld point, and then on top of that, it had dropped the back wall about an inch. There was a crack down at the bottom. Looking inside, it looked like there was also the wall had separated by about an inch under the cabinets towards in the kitchen area. So that's pretty significant damage. I started calling around. This is a very small town on the California coast. Not a lot of places that can do that level of repair. Even Forrest River dealers typically don't do welding type frame axle repairs. So it was kind of trying to find the nearest shop that could do that. Turns out the nearest available shop was in Ukiah. That's about an hour and a half away. So found a weld shop there that would do the estimate. I had a mobile guy come out, but they took pictures, but ultimately they can't do the repair, so they weren't able to do an estimate, which was kind of a waste of time on my part. Lesson learned. So then the problem becomes me and the dog, live in the trailer full-time while we're on a contract. So there's a bunch of stuff in the camper. There's the dog. It's California, so trying to find an apartment, one, it's super costly, and then two, the dog's with me, so that's an added issue in trying to find an apartment. Then we got to move all this stuff out into an apartment. Bottom line, I wasn't willing to do that. Everybody I had called trying to get estimates was basically saying this was a total loss on the part of the vehicle, even without looking at it specifically. So the options being, one, that it is a total loss and the camper's gone, and two, that in the off chance it's repairable, this would be a lengthy month-plus repair to do axle, frame, structural damage. So started looking at long-term options. I had planned to be in the RPOD, which is a little 18-foot travel trailer towing with a Tacoma, for another 5 years or so. That was the plan. And then long-term, wanted to do an Airstream. We'll get into why Airstream later, but wanted to do an Airstream. So rather than look at a whole bunch of intermediate options between the RPOD and an Airstream, I started to consider whether the long-term plan would be doable now. And met somebody at work that had an Airstream here at the same campground. They had dealt with Bay Area, Airstream, and Fairfield outside San Francisco. So kind of opened up a dialogue with them. That's about 3.5, 4 hours away. So did a lot of correspondence by email, kind of did some negotiating by email, started looking at models. There was a model I had in mind that I really liked, which is the 25-foot Globetrotter, the 2019 edition. They had changed the inside decor to something that I really liked as far as the color scheme. It was very kind of European, clean lines model. So really wanted that. I had hoped 5 years down the road to pick this same model up used and knock off the depreciation part. Anyway, opened up dialogue with them. They had one that was coming in that was the exact thing that I wanted, 2020 though, which is halfway through the 2020 model year. It'll go on until June or July of 2020. So for various reasons, it seemed like a better option to go with the new. One, financing is a whole lot easier with new than it is with used. There's a lot of factors in financing with used. I wanted to find private financing to try to cut down the interest rate, which did actually work out. Opened up the dialogue with them. The whole holdup to this whole thing is I couldn't get the RPOD towed to get the estimate until I had something else to move into. So one thing was kind of holding up the next as far as steps. So did end up finalizing the deal with Bay Area. The Globetrotter, come to find out, so the dry weight I believe was about 5,900. The GVWR was 74. The Tacoma can tow up to 6,400 pounds. So originally my thought was, hey, I can get it back up to Fort Bragg dry without anything loaded, without the tanks full. Come to find out though, the tongue weight overloads the Tacoma, so I wasn't able to bring it back. But they were awesome. They delivered here without any additional cost to me, which was pretty cool. So they brought it up. I made about 3 trips down there, both to kind of look over the units, then came back to kind of finalize paperwork, and then came back to do like a walkthrough in a kind of a tech session where they teach you orientation, where they teach you everything. So after all said and done, they brought it up here, moved everything over, took a day. Unfortunately, it fell on a day when right between 2 shifts when I was working, so I worked night shift and sleep into the day. So had to get up real early, had to move the RPOD over, had to, then they brought the new unit in, had to receive that, and then move everything over very quickly within a few hours, and then head off to the next shift. So it was a little crazy. But it worked out. Got everything in. Spent a couple of days. It's funny that the more you live in one camper, that everything's kind of tailored, right? You find compartments and you find bins and things that work to the space that you have. Turns out the RPOD had rather good big space storage, which is great. Did have to find the right bins, did have to find the right sizes, but had a lot of big space storage. Very good. Airstream does a great job of using all the space that they have, but there's a lot of, it's not very big places in storage. So it's a lot of very small nook kind of storage things that you kind of have to find a use for, come to find out. Anyway, got everything moved over, spent a few days kind of tailoring, kind of fitting stuff into different places, finding the best place, finding what makes sense, getting rid of some extra stuff, kind of thin some stuff down. They did end up towing the RPOD out. It was not roadworthy. With axle and frame damage, of course, you don't want it to, one, hit anything else, two, the axle to further damage and start really going crazy, or you don't want to drop that back wall even more. So they had to load it up on a flatbed, which was a whole big production. and then take it over to Ukiah to the trailer repair place. The bottom line after that was that insurance, the claim process took a few more weeks, kind of going back and forth between what they were going to do. At one point they said, we think this is a manufacturer defect, in which case it was going to fall back on warranty, which is a whole nother avenue of road. And then apparently their claims team kind of changed tracks on that and decided that they were going to cover it. So almost $8,000 of damage for the estimate, and they were going to cover it. So from going to a total loss, which would have been, well, not great, and I don't really know the whole, I was interested to find out what the total loss procedure was as far as how things go. But from going from that to now we're going to repair it, I was counting on the kind of the disposition of the vehicle to be pretty simple, and now it's a little more complicated. Now I have 2 campers once it's repaired. So looking at either selling it, which may be an interesting process, or maybe renting it out or doing like an RV share kind of thing. And it's more stuff that I have to look into. It'll be a month plus before they finalize the repairs. So bottom line, we're in a new Airstream. Ended up driving up to Oregon. They have 0% sales tax in Oregon, so bought a Chevy Silverado up there to tow the new Airstream, traded in the Tacoma. Felt like I got a pretty good deal on that. Wasn't exactly, I'd hoped for a little bit bigger of a truck in the Silverado class, but ended up having to do what I could do at the moment and what was available up there. They didn't have as many heavy-duty trucks available as I'd hoped, but it will still cover the Airstream and be able to get us around until we can move up. So that's where we are in a new camper, in a new truck. Loving it. There's a lot of great features to this. It's a whole lot more space than the RPOD, for one thing. We'll do like a full tour coming up, but I just wanted to share as a update. The RPOD got me to a ton of places over the last year, all the way from South Carolina out to Arizona, out to North Dakota, then Colorado, and then out here in the northern coast of California. So can't complain. Like I said, I plan to be in another 5 years fully happy in the little space. Didn't need a whole lot. I suppose it should be said, why Airstream? It seems kind of a exorbitant move going from an RPOD to Airstream. Like I said, this was the long-term plan. The long-term plan was that I don't ever foresee having a house again other than as an investment. So this is what I would retire in. If I wanted to stay someplace, I would buy land and put in a pedestal. That's the plan. And most of that's due to kind of a minimalistic outlook on things, and that I don't want to have that much stuff ever again. So this is as much stuff as I want, just this. So there's that. The other thing is just the quality, the reputation of Airstream. As far as RVs go, Airstream is at the highest tier as far as quality, as far as the durability of it. There is some idiosyncrasies to the aluminum business that take some extra considerations. But all in all, it's the highest tier of quality and reliability and value. So there's that. There's that. As far as Airstream 2, to me, there's kind of a mindset of minimalism that everything should be functional, right? It's not about the thing in particular. It's not about being attached to things, but it is about the thing being a utility, a tool to get you places. And there is an aspect to that the tool still needs to be of quality, be of value, and also enhance the experience is what I'm trying to say. This enhances the experience, the aesthetics of an Airstream, the kind of zen of an Airstream, that everything has a beauty to it, a simpleness to it, that it enhances being out in nature, that it kind of fits into being out in nature. That's what I like about Airstream. There's not a lot of complication, there's not slides, there's not a lot of things to, you know, put out to deploy. It's simple, but it's elegant. It's a value, it's quality. Airstreams hold their value very well as far as resale. So for all of those reasons, Airstream was why. And as far as why the 25-foot Globetrotter, as far as the versus the 23, I had, for a long time, I had considered the 23. It seemed like, kind of going up from an 18-foot RPOD, it seemed like the perfect size that was still pretty small, was still doable for national parks. But looking long term, I really felt like 25 would provide the extra space long term, just thinking ahead to would I want more space. And the other thing was that the 25 is the shortest you can get that has the two wraparound windows on the front. The 23 has a bathroom over here, so you kind of lose that whole window, you lose a lot of the light. So I really wanted that. If they had made a 23 that had the bathroom kind of in the middle of the rig, then that would have been great, but that's just not the way they do those. So that's why the 25, a lot of people said, you know, it's still doable for a lot of the national parks, a lot of places you can still get into without a whole lot of trouble. So it's not a 30, 40 foot fifth wheel. So I think that this is the perfect size as far as things go, and that this is the way to go. So that's why 25 versus 23. The whole used versus new thing, as I said, I intended to do a used Airstream of this model. Problem was they only revised this to the model that I really fell in love with in 2019. So there's not, given 1 year, there's not any of those locally used on the market. The plan was to find this model used 5 years down the road, which is not going to be able to happen. It had to happen now. We had to have them. Hey, bud, what you doing? Yeah. Hi. What's up here? Up. Hey. Up. So the plan was, you know, to get this used 5 years down the road, which would have been doable, but didn't work out. I had to make the move. I had to do this before I could get the RPOD estimated, before I could get it repaired. Sorry, he's shedding like crazy. I don't know why. That time of the year, I guess. So the whole used thing, if I had looked at other models, used is a whole different beast to get into. Can you sit down, please? Sit down. Sit. Thank you. Good job. So the whole used arena is a whole different thing to get into. It takes a whole lot more consideration. You have to be able to, you know, really inspect stuff, make sure that everything's in line. You're dealing with, and a lot of times you're dealing with like private party buyers, which again, as far as financing, as far as finalizing that kind of a transaction is a whole lot different beast. And honestly, and a lot of times people will tell you too, as far as used Airstreams, you really need to consider like a nationwide search. It's going all over to try to find stuff that would fit your criteria. And I just, working full time, I just didn't have the time or the resources to spend on that sort of thing. Plus, this was holding up the whole getting the RPOD estimated and repaired thing. So that's why new versus used. We'll see if it is the right decision in the long term. Ultimately, you just have to make a decision and go with it, and be willing to learn from it if it's the wrong thing to do. So we'll see how things go. But so far, happy with it. It's working out as far as the financial balance I'd hope to be in a whole lot different of a place in 5 years than we are now. But this is where we're at, and moving on from here. I've always said you just have to, these kind of things come up, and you just have to put one foot in front of the other. You just have to make the next decision, the next choice. And there's not a whole lot of, other than learning from mistakes as you make them, there's not a whole lot you can do in looking back, right? You can only learn from what you've done and then move forward and use that to inform new decisions. So that's what I'm doing. Like I said, it's worked out so far. It's been a whole lot of arrangements between the RPOD repair, between buying the new Airstream, between selling the Tacoma, between getting a new truck. That's been the majority of this contract here in Fort Bragg. So pretty stressful, a lot of things to figure out, a lot of things to try to coordinate, a lot of factors in play, but it's been a learning experience. And yeah, so 2020 life update. We'll see you on the next video.